Welcome to Spatial Conversations. I'm Alex Bratton, the CEO and Chief Geek of Lextech. And with me today, I have Oliver from Contxtual, and we're going to be diving into all things spatial. Welcome, Oliver.
Thanks, Alex. Great to be here.
I appreciate you jumping in with us. As someone who's spent a whole lot of time in spatial VR and otherwise, if you look at just the overall landscape right now, is there anything in particular that excites you the most about spatial computing?
Yeah, I think we're in a really interesting place in the sort of the history of these headsets, where we are now, and I think the capabilities of the operating system are really interesting, specifically Vision OS. We've sort of learnt from a lot of what's come before, especially the Magic Leap devices and so on. So I think we're right on this cusp of the operating system being very capable and increasingly capable over a very short period of time, if we think back to February last year. And the headsets and the hardware, I think, will catch up over time.
You said something interesting there, the operating system, because that isn't something folks really ever focused on in the, I'm going to call it the old world VR of the past 5 to 10 years.
Mhm. Mhm.
You jumped in, you ran an app, but the OS wasn't really at core. How do you see the difference between, I guess, what existed VR OS and what's Apple specifically brought in Vision OS?
Yeah, I think it's that differentiation of what is spatial computing. And although there's lots of definitions and interpretations, for me, spatial computing is having an operating system that runs all the time and you're living in reality and you're overlaying that digital content on reality most of the time. Whereas if you say a Quest headset, as you mentioned, you're jumping into an app. It's very specific. Whereas our sort of view on the future is we'll have these headsets or glasses or both at two ends of a spectrum and be enjoying just looking at reality most of the time and then engaging with digital content at various points throughout our day.
Love it. And given that bringing things into your environment, we'll talk about the industry in a second, but have you personally found, I guess, really interesting, whether it's productivity or wow moments spatially for you?
Yeah, so we had this idea, and again, I've got 25 years in user experience doing research strategy and design. And about 8 years ago, I got my first experience of the HoloLens, and I went, wow, this multimodal interaction, overlaying digital content on the physical world. And so over that period of time, we've been what I call exploring. We've been looking at academic research, we've been co-authoring research, but we've been prototyping with headsets like the Magic Leap, especially the Magic Leap 2, to try and understand what makes sense in a person's everyday world. So for the launch of the Vision Pro last year, we had an app in the App Store called Day Ahead. And the idea of that was to try and think about what is a way of reinterpreting information that might be available through an app, in our case, the calendar app, but at the moment in the Vision Pro is a big iPad app, but we don't want
Mm-hmm.
that in our field of view all day. So we interpreted that to a beautiful 3D glass tube that shows you visualizes where your meetings are in the day. And of course, you can click on those if you want, and you can get up what that information is. But for us, it was rethinking what are the opportunities for spatial computing and providing these glanceable information visualizations.
And I have to say, I'm sorry, but I'm really hoping Apple steals inspiration from that and updates the core calendar because, yes, we all need that.
Yeah, I'm more than
Totally
happy
agree.
to be Sherlock. That's not an issue.
Nice. Well, so you mentioned design and your passion and your core focus on design. When it comes to thinking, again, beyond the VR, I'm taking you to a new world, what kind of
Mm.
challenges have you and the team had to really rethink when it comes to designing for spatial?
Yeah, I think there's two aspects to that. There's the ideation itself and the thinking of how do we uh, explore the underlying needs and behaviors of people who will be using these applications to look at the opportunity for spatial computing as a new type. And for that, I referenced 25 years ago when mobile was just starting to emerge, right? Like at first, we just wanted to put really small websites on mobile phones, right? But then we got into that mobile first era, started by Luke Wroblewski, which was the Instagrams, the Ubers. How do we rethink for spatial computing in the same way that we rethought for mobile? And that takes tools. It takes like design workflows and ideation. And I think one of the big issues at the moment is that we don't have really easy ways to prototype for spatial computing, right? There's this big barrier where we can't just quickly put concepts together into the headset. We've got to go through quite a process, either 2D design, or do we want to design in headset for these ultimate experiences as well?
Got it. And that have definitely seen that as well. Just those challenges of how do we make it real faster? And that's one of the
Yeah,
things that I focus on is
exactly.
we have to make this real, or it doesn't click.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
when you've looked at really the experiences to help kind of educate folks on what's possible in spatial, anything that's jumped out at you as kind of the killer app or apps of, I mean, specifically the Vision Pro, but just spatial and VR in general?
Yeah, so I think the things, the orchestration apps, so things like we've got a company called Telstra Purple here in Australia, Australia's largest telco. They do a consulting. They've been working with a group called Energy Queensland here, who are doing that. I want a map of the area. I want drone feeds of the like the Porsche app sort of thing. I want photos. I want statistics. So I think those orchestration ones are great. The MBA type view, God view of the board as
So
well.
back to your multimodal, lots of different things coming together.
Yeah, the potential for that because it brings unique pieces of content together in a way that we just can't have through other ways. And then some of the mixed reality, the emerging experiences to engage people in really unique ways. So things like Mixed World in China creates this large space experience where people essentially self-guide by interacting with these beautiful uh, digital content assets that they can sort of move around a whole 20 by 30 meter space to have this ongoing experience. It's phenomenal.
So you mentioned China. I know that you were there recently for an event that you had a chance to speak at and do some other things. Um, uh, when you look back at that and just all of the folks that were involved, anything that jumped out at you as kind of trends for the industry of where are things heading? What's new and it's kind of a new driving direction?
Yeah, I think it's more a statement on the industry that we have to keep remembering that we're only, a year and a bit into this. And
It
so
feels
one of
like
the
so much
things
longer, doesn't it?
it does, right? But the device is new. We're still playing around with it. But that's what I was really excited about at the conference in China was all the different things. So would I say necessarily a trend? No, because there were so many different things. We had Ryan McLeod from Black Box who won the Apple Design Award for his game. We had an amazing talk by Keke Lee, who's from Alibaba's Taobao. And if you haven't seen that app in Vision Pro, it's phenomenal. I've never seen a talk so detailed in its design approach and design thinking and design system in 2D, let alone 3D. Right through to words of wisdom from Eduardo from Spatial Voyages talking about, hey, we're not out of the woods yet. Spatial computing is still in its early days. There's still going to be lots of challenges, but there's so much there to take advantage of and to be part of.
Well, and one of the things that I love about that with some of the information you've shared is just it was a community coming together. And I know that's one of the reasons why getting folks together and being able to share like this, this is such a leap from what we've had before that we all have so much learning to do to make this real. It's awesome to hear a community coming together like that.
Yeah, Sichi, who heads up this conference and the SwiftGG community in China, they first ran it last year in March. Okay, so if we think back, that's essentially a month after the Vision Pro launched, and they had 600 people back then at the conference, or 500. This year, it was, I think, 2,500 people attending the whole sort of expo conference and about 700 in the conference.
Nice.
So he's done an amazing job of cultivating that community. And again, I run Vision OS events here in Australia. We've done one in Sydney, one in Melbourne. And again, the purpose of these things is, as you say, to bring the people who are interested together because I think a lot of things that are happening are either below the radar or maybe, as
Yeah.
you would well know, enterprise, right? So there's not much
Mhm.
reason for those companies to go out and talk about these apps. But when we all get together and show the work that we're doing, we benefit from that because we go, oh, you're doing that thing, or oh, you use that in that way, right? That's a great idea. So
Always,
I think
always
bringing
ways to
community
level up,
together
leaning
is
on each
great.
other. Exactly,
Yeah, exactly.
exactly. Well, looking at whether it was that event or some of the things that you've had a chance to kind of observe and go hands-on with, speaking of enterprise, anything
Mhm.
that's starting to jump out at you as far as kind of business cases for folks of, they're a real business value for bringing spatial to the table?
One of the things, which isn't necessarily about the value per se, but I think is overcoming one of the barriers that we might have seen in the early days. I think we also saw this guest mode for the Apple Vision Pro as this real barrier to get people in who might just want to engage with content or be walked through content. And a number of apps that I saw, so specifically a sales presentation tool from Maison in Japan, Story from Immersive Tech in China, they're all, and Mixworld actually did it as well. They're all sort of skirting some of the onboarding calibration. So mostly the eye calibration to save time, but still allowing people to engage with just the hand calibration. So viewing content
Mm-hmm.
and doing very simple engagements with content, it was a bit of a game changer because people were able to move through these experiences much faster. People could get the headset on and straight into it without that slow process of calibration. So that was one key takeaway that I thought was really interesting about it, getting people into headset and into the content as fast as possible
I
for
love
these
that.
enterprise or sales type tools or whatever it might
Oh,
be.
absolutely. There's so many folks that want to bring other people in for shorter term types of
Yeah.
experiences, and Apple, we have high expectations for June. If you're listening,
Yeah.
exactly. It's how do we make this easier and more approachable for folks?
And
Um,
I think that Apple have been doing a great job in the sense that, again, it's only been a short period of time. They've been making far more incremental improvements
oh,
to Vision OS
absolutely.
than I think we kind of expected. Like, obviously, with the ultra wide display, obviously, with the app
Mm.
recently coming out and that engagement with guest mode. I've done over 190 one-on-one demos of the Apple Vision Pro here in Australia to try and show people what this is all about. And obviously that guest mode has been one of the things that I've had to overcome each time.
That's awesome to hear. And again, that kind of sharing to bring folks in. That's my number one recommendation for folks that if they haven't had the experience yet, if we're there, we'll take them in. But otherwise, get to an Apple store. Yeah, if you can, it's just so helpful to dive into that.
You
Well,
have
any
to
other?
experience it.
Agreed, agreed. And that to me, that's the key is getting to the. And the first wow is okay, cool, the dinosaur experience. We won't say any
Hmm.
more.
Hmm.
But then it's the business value wow of oh, this could be a huge change to the way I work. Have you had any of those kind of things that have jumped out from people who, from a business perspective, have jumped into spatial?
Yeah, and it's more from the people that we're seeing or inviting along. So Geek Space is obviously a big one. They
Mm-hmm.
did a great talk at our Melbourne event and in fact invited their client along. So it was really great to hear firsthand from the client about how they're using the Geek Space platform to engage with their enterprise customers. So it's not like they're talking to a converted audience or anything like that, to really make a difference. And just the mechanism that they might go to something like a trade show. Traditionally, those end clients might have had to ship a whole bunch of stuff to a physical location, put it together, and things like that. Now they can take a couple of headsets and walk people through that experience, usually in a more engaging way as well than just having a physical object there,
I love
like a
that.
tractor or something.
Now and again, something that it makes it more approachable, makes it more
Yeah.
practical. That's huge. Well,
And I think
jumping.
we've seen massive leaps in fidelity. So
Mm,
some friends of mine are working on an aircraft cabin at the moment, and I've never seen anything with that level of detail, reflectivity of the chrome and the elements, and it's very impressive, I think, how fast some companies have adapted and changed and really evolved the workflow to get higher quality experiences in the headset.
no, agreed. Well, so your passion for design is definitely coming through. So talking about you for a minute, so if you rewind way back, was there anything in particular that personally kind of brought you into the design world?
Yeah, my when I was in high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and so I wanted to work with people in some capacity, And my experience with technology started with the Mac 2E way back in the day. So I'd always used computing as a tool to get a job done rather than necessarily an interest in the computing itself. And so I ended up doing psychology and then getting into the field of human computer interaction. And all of that was based around how can we make these experiences, these digital experiences, a better support the needs and behaviors of the customers that they're trying to do. And design is obviously the mechanism to have that dialogue with the customer. What is that interface? What are the interactions and so on? So it very much came from how can we better understand people and their mental models and their motivations and better serve their needs with technology.
So if someone's interested in, maybe they're non-technical today, but if they're interested in starting to get into the spatial world, any recommendations of where they start?
Well, as we said, go and try it first of all, and that is the tricky part of where we're at, right? We were a small company, but we've been lucky enough to purchase a bunch of these headsets. So I mentioned the Magic Leaps and so on, but you have to get in and start to play around with it. And obviously, the Apple Vision Pro at the moment, the headset cost is high, but there are other devices that you can play with to get into it, or using the simulator is obviously a key start. We've still got developer labs going on, I believe, around the world for Vision OS. So play around with it, but really come from a mindset of how can we rethink these experiences for digital content in the physical world. That relationship, I think, opens up a whole new range of experiences that we've not thought of before.
So then if we jump from the individual to the companies, so whether that's, and let's talk maybe mid to enterprise at this point because of that
Sure.
price point. Any suggestions for folks on where those businesses should be starting to think about how spatial helps them? Where should they start?
Yeah, again, it's education and awareness we're seeing, like A, experiencing it, B, becoming aware of what the limitations are at the moment, because they still are there. And really, we suggest starting with something small so they can get an understanding of it. So
Any
they
particular
usually know
areas you're suggesting people focus on as far as those starting points of where to use it?
it's what I think is quite fascinating is that traditionally, if we think about and I'm going to diverge a bit, is user experience sort of split off into two fields. We had user experience and we had service design. And service design was all about how do we create experiences in the physical world to better support people in a shopping experience or whatever that might be. To me, we're now bringing those fields back together where we have these digital interfaces in a physical world. So thinking about, and one example is that we did a whole bunch of research for electric vehicle charging, for example. And that was looking at underlying customer needs and behaviors. And what we saw is that there's these two pain points, right? One is actually when I get to the shopping center, the Westfield or whatever it is, where the pin on the map in my Google Maps or my Apple Maps has said the charger is, I'm at the shopping center, but where in the shopping center is the charger? Okay, so that last mile. And also, when I get to the charger, if I'm not familiar with this charger, what are the steps that I need to do? Do I plug it in first? Do I tap first? What are the processes? So we strongly believe that there are a lot of unmet needs and behaviors that our clients usually know about or through their research with customers, but that haven't been addressed. And these types of experiences, whether it's Snap Glasses or the Apple Vision Pro, give us opportunities to think about those things in new ways and to deal with those problems in new ways.
Love it. Well, any closing thoughts in terms of, again, the power of spatial and where you see the future going with this?
Yeah, I think there's just so much opportunity. It's an exciting time. You have to get in, you have to get your hands dirty. So start playing around with things. We're at that stage where there's no bad ideas, right? Just go and experiment. And a lot of that experimentation, we used to have a thing called body storming, right? Where you could act out these to scenarios, like almost like theater. And I think that type of approach can be really useful in with spatial computing as well. We think about when I'm at my desk as a designer, as a developer, or as a knowledge worker, what's the information that I want to see and engage with? Or how might I better engage with data that I need to better understand? I think, you know, uh, data visualization, I think, is a massive opportunity in this space. New
Absolutely.
ways of engaging with data, seeing that data in different ways, seeing it on a much greater scale than a screen could ever support. Yeah, there's a world of possibilities out there.
Love it. Well, Oliver, thank you for jumping in. Got to finish with a fist. Awesome.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Alex. Thanks for having
And
me.
thank you for joining us for another Spatial Conversation.